Hey everyone, I'm Hallie, and I'm 31 years old. Before I dive into this absolutely mind-blowing story that completely destroyed and rebuilt my life over the past 3 months, I need you to drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And please hit that subscribe button because what I'm going to tell you involves family betrayal, stolen money, and a secret inheritance that will make your jaw drop. 3 months ago, I thought I knew exactly who my family was. I thought I understood my place in this world. However, everything I believed was built on lies, manipulation, and a conspiracy that goes back over 15 years. Picture this. It's a freezing Tuesday morning in Portland, Oregon. I'm standing outside the house I grew up in, the house that holds every single memory of my childhood. And my key won't turn in the lock. Not because it's broken, not because it's stuck, but because someone changed every single lock while I was gone. Someone being my older sister, Madison, who sent me a text that still makes my hands shake when I think about it. "You're dead to this family. Hallie, don't ever come back. Your stuff will be on the porch Saturday between 2-5 p.m. We won't be here." But here's where this story gets absolutely insane, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this will blow your mind. What I discovered next changed everything I thought I knew about my family, money, and a grandmother who apparently saw this betrayal coming from miles away. Because 2 days after Madison locked me out, I received an email that turned my entire world upside down. Nevertheless, let me start from the beginning, because this story doesn't begin with locked doors and cruel texts. This story starts 18 years ago with a woman who saw something in me that nobody else did. Her name was Eleanor Bennett, and she was my grandmother on my mother's side. While my family built their empire in tech consulting through Bennett Solutions, Grandma Eleanor was secretly teaching me something that would later save my life. She was teaching me to paint, but more importantly, she was teaching me to fight. You see, I've never been like the rest of my family. My sister Madison is 5 years older than me, and from the moment she could walk, she was destined for greatness in their eyes. She understood business strategies when she was 12. She was networking at corporate events when other kids were playing video games. Meanwhile, my parents, Sarah and Robert Bennett, looked at Madison and saw their legacy. They looked at me and saw, well, honestly, I'm not sure they really saw me at all. Sarah runs Bennett Solutions with an iron fist. She's the kind of woman who has quarterly projections memorized and can spot a failing client relationship from a mile away. Robert handles the financial side, quiet but calculating, always running numbers in his head. Together, they built a $15 million consulting firm that helps tech startups optimize their operations. It's impressive. I'll give them that. But it was never what I wanted. And apparently, Eleanor knew that from day one. What I wanted was to create. I wanted to take a blank canvas and fill it with colors that made people feel something. I wanted to capture moments of beauty that would last forever. I wanted to paint. And the only person who understood that was Grandma Eleanor. But here's what I didn't know at the time. Eleanor wasn't just supporting my dreams. She was planning for a war that she knew was coming. I remember being 8 years old, sitting in her sunroom that overlooked her garden. My small hands gripping a paintbrush that felt too big for my fingers. Eleanor would sit beside me, her weathered hands guiding mine, showing me how to blend colors, how to create depth, how to make something beautiful from nothing. "Hallie, honey," she would say in that gentle voice of hers, "don't let anyone tell you that art isn't important. The world needs beauty. The world needs people who can see beyond the numbers and the profits and remember what it means to be human. But more than that, you need to be strong enough to protect what you love." At the time, I thought she was just talking concerning art. I had no idea she was preparing me for the fight of my life. Those afternoons in her sunroom were my sanctuary. While Madison was at advanced math camps and business seminars, I was learning concerning light and shadow, the way certain colors could evoke specific emotions, the power of visual storytelling. Eleanor taught me that art wasn't just making pretty pictures, it was communicating something deeper, something that couldn't be expressed in words or spreadsheets. But those precious moments were always shadowed by family tension. Every family dinner was a reminder that I didn't fit the Bennett mold. Madison would monopolize conversations with her latest achievement, her plans for college, her internship applications to Fortune 500 companies. My parents beamed with pride, asking detailed questions regarding her projects, offering advice and connections. When it was my turn to speak, if I mentioned art or painting, the conversation shifted quickly. "That's nice, sweetheart," Sarah said with a tight smile. "But you should really focus on your math and science classes. Those are the subjects that will help you get into a good business program." Madison smirked and added something cutting like, "Art is a nice hobby, Hallie, but you can't build a career on finger painting." The whole table laughed, except for Eleanor, who caught my eye and gave me a small, encouraging nod. But I noticed something else in her expression: anger. Eleanor was furious with how they treated me, and I could see her wheels turning, even then. I learned early on to keep my dreams small, to hide my sketchbooks, to downplay my passion, but Eleanor never let me forget who I really was. She sneaked me expensive art supplies, took me to gallery openings, and told me stories concerning famous artists who overcame adversity to create masterpieces. More importantly, she started having private conversations with me regarding money, independence, and never letting anyone control your future. "You have a gift, Hallie," she told me during our painting sessions. "Don't let them bury it under their expectations. And remember this: the most important thing in life is having your own resources. Money means freedom, and freedom means you can't be controlled." Kit, when I was 15, Eleanor was diagnosed with stage 3 pancreatic cancer. The diagnosis came out of nowhere, devastating our entire family. But it hit me differently than everyone else. For my parents and Madison, Eleanor was a beloved family member. For me, she was my lifeline, my advocate, my only ally in a family that didn't understand me. However, what I didn't realize at the time was that Eleanor's diagnosis triggered something much bigger. She had been watching Madison's growing influence over my parents, had witnessed my slow retreat from my artistic dreams, and she had been planning. The cancer just accelerated her timeline. During her treatment, Eleanor had me come over every day after school. Officially, I was helping her with household tasks and keeping her company. In reality, she was giving me what she called life lessons that seemed strange at the time, but later proved to be crucial. She taught me concerning legal documents, trusts, and how wealthy families protect their assets across generations. She made me memorize important phone numbers and addresses. She showed me her personal documents and explained what each one meant. Most importantly, she made me promise that no matter what happened, I never give up on my art. "Hallie," she said during one of our last conversations before she passed, "I need you to understand something. Your family loves you, but they don't see you. They're going to try to control you, to make you into someone you're not. When that happens, and it will happen, you need to remember that you have more power than you think. You just don't know it yet." The cancer moved aggressively. Eleanor fought with everything she had, but within 14 months, she was gone. I was 16 when we laid her to rest, and I felt like I was burying the only person who had ever truly seen me. What I didn't know was that Eleanor had spent her final months building me a fortress that I wouldn't discover for another 15 years. After Eleanor's death, everything changed dramatically. Madison was 21 and already a rising star at Bennett Solutions. With Eleanor's protective influence gone, Madison's control over the family dynamic grew exponentially. She wasn't just the favored daughter anymore. She was being positioned as the heir apparent. Furthermore, she used that power to systematically eliminate any support I might have had for my artistic pursuits. High school became a psychological battlefield. I stayed up late working on paintings for my portfolio, dreaming of art schools like RISD or SCAD. But every time I brought up my plans, Madison interceded with surgical precision. "Hallie's being completely unrealistic," she told our parents over dinner. "Art school is a waste of money and time. She needs to think regarding her future, contributing to the family business." My parents, still grieving Eleanor and increasingly focused on expanding Bennett Solutions, began to defer to Madison's judgment more and more. They trusted her business acumen, her practical thinking, her ability to see the big picture. "Madison's absolutely right," Sarah said when I tried to argue. "Art is a wonderful hobby, but you need to think practically. The family business needs fresh perspectives, and you could bring a creative element to our marketing strategies." I tried to push back aggressively. I joined every art club at school, entered local competitions, even won several significant awards. But instead of celebrating my achievements, my family saw them as confirmation that I was wasting time on frivolous pursuits. The breaking point came during my senior year when I was accepted to 4 different prestigious art schools. I had worked for months on my portfolio, had saved money from part-time jobs to pay application fees, had written essay after essay concerning my passion for visual arts. When the acceptance letters arrived, I was over the moon. Nevertheless, my celebration was devastatingly short-lived. "Absolutely not," Madison said when I showed the family my acceptance letters. She was 26 by then, a partner at Bennett Solutions, and her word carried enormous weight. "We're not paying for Hallie to waste 4 years playing with paint. But I got substantial scholarships," I protested desperately. "The financial aid package covers most of the tuition. It's not regarding the money." Robert chimed in, though I could see him calculating costs in his head. "It's making smart decisions for your future." Sarah nodded in agreement. "Madison's absolutely right. You're going to Portland State for business, and that's final. You can minor in art if you want, but your major needs to be something practical." I begged. I pleaded. I showed them portfolio pieces that had won awards, letters of recommendation from teachers, statistics concerning successful artists and their earning potential. Nothing worked. My parents had made their decision, and Madison's influence had completely tipped the scales. Consequently, I went to Portland State. I majored in business with a minor in studio art, spending my days learning market analysis and corporate strategy while my heart remained in the art building, working on paintings that felt like stolen moments of authenticity. Madison graduated from Bennett Solutions partner track and became a senior partner. She was featured in local business magazines, spoke at major conferences, and became the face of the company's next generation. Meanwhile, I felt like I was slowly disappearing, becoming a shadow of the person Eleanor had believed I could be. College was a compromise that satisfied no one, least of all me. I did well enough in my business classes to avoid family drama, but my real passion remained in the art studio. I worked part-time at a prestigious local gallery, learning the business side of art while still nurturing my creative side. After graduation, I landed a job at a well-respected creative agency in downtown Portland. It wasn't painting in the traditional sense, But I was using my artistic skills to create marketing materials, design campaigns, and help businesses communicate visually with their customers. It felt like a bridge between my family's expectations and my own dreams. For several years, this arrangement worked reasonably well. I lived in a charming studio apartment, made decent money, and spent my evenings and weekends working on personal art projects. I had several successful shows at local galleries, sold numerous pieces, and began to build a solid reputation in Portland's competitive art scene. However, then the creative agency lost several major clients in quick succession. The 2020 pandemic devastated the creative industry, and small agencies like ours were among the first to feel the brutal impact. Layoffs were inevitable, and as one of the newer team members, I was among the first to go. Suddenly, at 29, I found myself unemployed, struggling to make rent, and facing the harsh reality that the artistic career I had been slowly building was more fragile than I had realized. I applied for unemployment, took on freelance gigs when I could find them, and burned through my small savings account trying to stay afloat after 8 months of barely scraping by. I swallowed my pride and made the call I had been dreading. I called my parents and asked if I could move back home temporarily, just until I got back on my feet. The conversation was awkward and humiliating. Sarah sighed heavily when I explained my situation, and I could practically hear her exchanging looks with Robert. "I suppose you could use your old room," she said finally. "But this is temporary. Hallie, 6 months at most, and you'd need to contribute to household expenses." Madison was significantly less diplomatic when she found out. "I told you this happens," she said when I arrived home with my belongings packed into several suitcases and boxes. "This is exactly what happens when you chase fairy tales instead of building a real career." The conditions of my return were made brutally clear from day one. I paid rent equivalent to a market-rate apartment, helped with extensive household chores, and actively looked for real employment. Madison, who by then was practically running Bennett Solutions while my parents focused on higher-level strategy, made it crystal clear that she considered my presence an enormous inconvenience. "You're 31 years old, Hallie," she reminded me daily. "Most people your age are building careers, starting families, contributing meaningfully to society. What are you doing? Living in your childhood bedroom and playing artist." The house felt completely different than it had when I was growing up. Madison had effectively moved into Eleanor's old role as the family matriarch, making decisions concerning everything from dinner plans to household rules. My parents, now in their mid-60s and more focused on legacy planning for Bennett Solutions, seemed content to let Madison take the lead on day-to-day family matters. Living under Madison's increasingly strict rules was suffocating. She instituted a curfew like I was a teenager, assigned me cleaning duties that took hours each day, and made snide comments regarding every job application I submitted that wasn't related to business or corporate consulting. "Look, there's an opening at Bennett Solutions," she said repeatedly, sliding job postings across the kitchen table. "Entry-level business analyst. You'd be perfect for it." But I knew exactly what that meant. Working for Madison, being under her thumb professionally as well as personally, giving up the last vestiges of my independence and artistic identity. So I kept applying for jobs in the creative field, kept hoping that something pan out, kept believing that I could rebuild my life without completely surrendering to their vision of who I should be. The tension in the house was absolutely palpable. Every conversation felt like a hostile negotiation. Every meal felt like a business meeting where I was the underperforming employee being called to account. Madison's frustration with my lack of progress grew more pronounced each week. "You're wasting everyone's time," She told me one evening when I came home from what she considered an unsuccessful job interview at a small design firm. "When are you going to grow up and accept reality?" The final explosion happened on a Sunday night in late November. I had spent the entire weekend working on a large painting that had been commissioned by an upscale local restaurant, something that actually paid me $1,500. I was excited concerning the project, proud of the work I was doing, and foolishly optimistic that my family might finally see that my artistic skills had real commercial value. Instead, when I showed them the nearly finished piece, Madison actually laughed out loud. "You think this is going to pay your bills?" she asked, gesturing dismissively at my canvas. "You think this is a career? Hallie, you're completely delusional." Something inside me finally snapped. Maybe it was months of built-up frustration. Maybe it was the way she dismissed not just my work, but my entire identity with such casual cruelty. Whatever it was, I found myself standing up, facing my sister with a boldness that surprised even me. "You know what, Madison? I'm absolutely tired of this. I'm tired of you treating me like I'm some kind of failure because I don't want to spend my life in corporate meetings and quarterly reports." Eleanor understood what I was trying to do. She believed in me. And you. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "You've been jealous of that relationship since we were kids." The room went completely dead silent. My parents stopped eating and stared at us, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation but unsure how to respond. Madison's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, rage, and something else I couldn't quite identify. "Jealous?" she repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. "Jealous of what exactly? Your complete inability to support yourself? Your refusal to grow up? Your pathetic attachment to a dead woman's fantasies? Don't you dare talk concerning Eleanor like that." I shot back. "She saw something in me that you've always been too threatened to acknowledge." "Threatened?" Madison stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I'm threatened by someone who can't even afford her own apartment? Someone who's living off her parents' charity at 31? You're not an artist. Hallie, you're a parasite." The word hit me like a physical blow. Parasite. Is that really how my family saw me? I looked at my parents desperately, hoping for some kind of support, some indication that Madison had gone too far. But Sarah was staring at her plate, and Robert was studying his hands intently. Their silence spoke volumes. "Fine," I said, grabbing my jacket from the back of my chair. "If that's how you really feel, then I don't need to be here." I stormed out of the house, my heart pounding with adrenaline and hurt. I drove around Portland for hours, eventually ending up at a 24-hour diner where I sat in a corner booth, drinking coffee and trying to figure out what to do next. I spent that night at a cheap motel near the airport, charging the room to my nearly maxed-out credit card and staring at the water-stained ceiling while I replayed the fight over and over in my mind. Part of me expected my phone to ring, expected someone from my family to call and apologize, to ask me to come home so we could work things out. But the call never came. The next morning, I had a job interview scheduled with a small nonprofit that needed someone to manage their social media and create promotional materials. It wasn't my dream job, but it was something, a chance to use my creative skills while earning a steady paycheck. The interview went exceptionally well. The director of the nonprofit, a kind woman named Janet who ran programs for homeless youth, seemed impressed with my portfolio and my willingness to wear multiple hats in a small organization. She offered me the position on the spot, with a start date the following Monday and a salary that allowed me to afford a small apartment. Feeling genuinely optimistic for the first time in months, I texted Madison, "Got a job, starting Monday, good salary. We can talk when I get home tonight." I spent the rest of the day apartment hunting, looking at studio apartments I could afford on my new salary. It was tight, but I could make it work. I could finally regain my independence and start rebuilding my life on my own terms. But when I got back to my family's house that evening, ready to share my good news and hopefully repair our relationship, my key wouldn't work. That's when I got Madison's text. That's when I realized that everything I thought I knew concerning my family was going to change forever. But here's where this story gets absolutely wild. 2 days later, while I was sitting in that same motel room trying to figure out how to survive being homeless and betrayed, I got an email that changed everything. The subject line read, "Urgent, Eleanor Bennett Trust, legal action required." The email was from a law firm I'd never heard of, Blackstone and Associates. The lawyer, a man named David Blackstone, said that he represented something called the Eleanor Bennett Trust, and that I needed to contact him immediately regarding a serious breach of fiduciary duty. I stared at that email for probably 10 minutes, my hands shaking. Eleanor had been dead for 15 years. What trust? What fiduciary duty? And why was a lawyer contacting me now, right after Madison had locked me out? I called the number in the email, and David Blackstone answered on the first ring, like he'd been waiting for my call. "Miss Bennett," he said, his voice grave. "I'm afraid we have a serious situation. Your family has been in violation of your grandmother's trust for years, and what happened to you 2 days ago triggered our monitoring system. We need to meet immediately." "What monitoring system?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "The one your grandmother put in place to protect you," he said. "Miss Bennett, you're not just Eleanor's granddaughter. You're the primary beneficiary of a $250,000 trust fund that your family has been illegally managing, and based on our preliminary investigation, they've stolen over $180,000 of your money." The phone slipped from my hand. Eleanor hadn't just left me memories and art supplies. She'd left me a fortune. And my family, the people who called me a parasite, who locked me out for being a failure, had been stealing from me for 15 years. But that was just the beginning. Because what David told me next made me realize that Eleanor hadn't just anticipated my family's betrayal. She'd planned for war, and she'd given me everything I needed to win it. What David Blackstone told me next shattered everything I thought I knew about Eleanor's death and my family's true nature. But first, he reminded me of Eleanor's final words from part 1, how she had planned for war. As I sat across from him in his mahogany-paneled conference room the following morning, watching him spread out documents that would change my life forever, I realized that the war Eleanor had planned wasn't just about protecting me, it was about destroying a criminal empire. "Miss Bennett," he began, his voice grave, "your grandmother didn't just anticipate your family's betrayal, she documented it, planned for it, and built an entire legal framework to protect you when it inevitably happened. Eleanor's war plan was 15 years in the making." He slid a thick folder across the table. "Eleanor started planning the Eleanor Bennett Trust when you were just 8 years old, right after she noticed how your family treated your artistic aspirations. She spent the next 7 years carefully structuring it to be absolutely bulletproof." My hands trembled as I opened the folder. The first document was a letter in Eleanor's handwriting, dated just 3 months before her diagnosis. "My dearest Hallie," it read, "if you're reading this, then Madison has finally shown her true colors. I've been watching her jealousy grow since you were a child, and I knew this day would come. But don't worry, my darling, Grandma has a plan, and it's going to be spectacular. The war I've been preparing for is about to begin, and you're going to win it." David cleared his throat. Eleanor established the Eleanor Bennett Trust with two primary goals: protect your inheritance and document your family's illegal activities. The monitoring system she installed wasn't just watching for lockouts, it was recording everything: audio surveillance, financial tracking, communication monitoring, everything legally obtained through the trust's authority as a property owner. Recording everything? I whispered, remembering how Eleanor had taught me about legal documents during her final months. Audio surveillance in the family home, tracking of all financial transactions, even monitoring of phone calls and emails, all legally obtained through the trust's authority as a property owner. He pulled out another document. Your grandmother technically owns 49% of the family home through a complex legal structure. Your parents never knew they were living in Eleanor's house. I stared at him in disbelief. Eleanor owned part of the house? Furthermore, she owned 30% of Bennett Solutions through shell companies and investment vehicles. Your family built their empire partially with Eleanor's money, and they never realized it. David's smile was predatory. She was a brilliant woman, your grandmother. A chess master playing a game everyone else didn't even know they were in. The scope of Eleanor's deception was breathtaking. While my family thought they were building their empire, Eleanor had been pulling strings from behind the scenes, positioning herself to bring it all crashing down when necessary. He activated a tablet and showed me financial records that made my head spin. Over the past 15 years, your family has stolen exactly $187,000 from your trust, but that's not the worst part. What's the worst part? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. They've been charging the trust for your living expenses since you moved back home. Every meal you ate, every utility bill, even the cleaning supplies you used. They billed it all to your trust account as beneficiary maintenance costs. They were literally making you pay for the privilege of being abused. The room started spinning. My family hadn't just stolen my inheritance. They'd made me unknowingly pay for my own imprisonment. The cruelty was so systematic, so calculated, that it took my breath away. David continued, his voice getting sharper. But Eleanor's masterstroke was the activation clause. The moment you were denied access to the family home, it triggered what she called Protocol 7. As of yesterday morning, I am now the acting trustee with full authority to recover all misappropriated funds and assets. What does that mean, exactly? It means, Miss Bennett, that we're going to destroy them, legally, financially, and publicly. He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. Your grandmother left detailed instructions. She wanted to make sure that when justice came, it came comprehensively. This is the war she planned for. Nevertheless, David wasn't finished with his revelations. He pulled out another set of documents that made my blood run cold. Eleanor also discovered something else during her investigation into your family's finances. Bennett Solutions has been embezzling from their clients for years. Your parents and Madison have been skimming money from startup investments, falsifying consulting reports, and operating what amounts to a sophisticated Ponzi scheme. That's impossible, I gasped. They're successful business people. They have clients, awards, recognition. All built on fraud, David said grimly. Eleanor spent months gathering evidence before her death. She hired private investigators, forensic accountants, even former FBI agents. The evidence is overwhelming. He showed me photographs, bank statements, altered contracts, and email communications that painted a picture of systematic fraud spanning nearly a decade. Bennett Solutions wasn't a legitimate consulting firm. It was an elaborate criminal enterprise that had been stealing from clients while maintaining a facade of respectability. Your grandmother estimated that your family has stolen approximately $12 million from their clients over the past 8 years. When this comes out, and it will come out, Bennett Solutions will collapse overnight. I felt sick. But what about their employees, their legitimate clients? Eleanor thought of that too. Part of the Trust's mission is to establish a victim compensation fund and provide transition assistance for innocent employees. Your grandmother wanted to make sure that justice didn't harm people who weren't involved in the fraud. The scope of Eleanor's planning was staggering. She hadn't just protected my inheritance. She'd built an entire apparatus to bring down a criminal enterprise while minimizing collateral damage. Every contingency had been considered, every innocent party protected. There's more, David continued. Eleanor also discovered that Madison has been embezzling from your parents. She's been siphoning money from Bennett Solutions into personal accounts, preparing to leave them holding the bag when everything collapsed. Your sister wasn't just planning to betray you. She was planning to betray everyone. How much? I asked weakly. Approximately $2.7 million over the past 3 years. Madison has been preparing for this for a long time. She saw the writing on the wall and decided to save herself at everyone else's expense. Subsequently, David showed me the most shocking evidence of all. Recorded conversations between Madison and a business partner discussing their plan to frame Robert and Sarah for the embezzlement, while Madison disappeared with the stolen money. Your sister is a sociopath, David said bluntly. These recordings show her laughing about your parents' inevitable arrest and discussing how she planned to blame everything on their declining mental health. I listened to Madison's voice on the recording, cold and calculating as she described her parents as useful idiots, and me as a pathetic failure who'll never amount to anything. The cruelty in her tone was breathtaking, but what shocked me more was the strategic thinking behind it. Madison hadn't just been mean to me, she'd been systematically destroying our entire family for years. Eleanor knew, David continued. She knew Madison was planning to destroy the entire family. That's why she spent her final months building this comprehensive defense system. She called it her nuclear option, mutually assured destruction for anyone who tried to harm you. Meanwhile, as David laid out Eleanor's evidence, I realized that my grandmother hadn't just been protecting me, she'd been protecting my parents too. Even though they'd failed to protect me. Eleanor had seen through Madison's manipulation and prepared to save everyone except the one person who truly deserved destruction. So what happens now? I asked. David's smile was terrifying in its intensity. Now we execute Eleanor's plan. First, we freeze all of your family's assets pending investigation. Second, we file criminal charges for embezzlement, fraud, and theft. Third, we seize control of Bennett Solutions and begin victim compensation. And fourth, he paused dramatically. We give you control of everything. Everything? Eleanor's will has a final surprise. If the trust is ever activated due to family betrayal, you inherit not just the trust fund, but Eleanor's shares in the house and Bennett Solutions. Combined with asset seizure from the fraud investigation, you'll control approximately $15 million in assets. My head was spinning. $15 million. More money than I could have ever imagined, all coming from the ashes of my family's destroyed empire. But I don't want to destroy my parents. They're victims too, in a way. Eleanor anticipated that response. She left you complete discretion about your parents' fate. You can choose to protect them, prosecute them, or anything in between. But Madison, his voice turned cold. Madison faces the full weight of criminal prosecution. Eleanor's instructions about her were explicit. No mercy. David then showed me the final element of Eleanor's plan. A public relations strategy designed to expose Bennett Solutions' fraud while protecting innocent clients and employees. Your grandmother hired a crisis management firm, arranged for witness protection if necessary, and even established a scholarship fund for art students affected by the scandal. She thought of everything. "When does this all start?" I asked, feeling overwhelmed. "It already has. As we speak, federal agents are executing search warrants at Bennett Solutions and your family home. Asset freezing orders are being served, and arrest warrants are being prepared." My phone started buzzing frantically. Text messages from Madison, missed calls from my parents, voicemails that I couldn't bring myself to listen to. "They know?" I asked. "They're finding out right now." Eleanor wanted them to experience the same shock and helplessness that they put you through. David handed me a secure phone. "This is your new number. Eleanor arranged for personal security, a safe house, and legal protection. You're going to need all of it because what happens next is going to be intense." What happens next? Media coverage, congressional investigations, criminal trials. Your family's entire world is about to collapse, and you're going to be at the center of it all. However, David wasn't finished. "Eleanor left you one final gift. She recorded a video message to be played only after Protocol 7 was activated. Would you like to see it?" With shaking hands, I nodded. The conference room's large screen flickered to life, and suddenly, Eleanor was there, sitting in her sunroom where we'd painted together so many times. She looked frail from her cancer treatment, but her eyes were fierce. "Hello, my darling Hallie," she said, her voice warm but determined. "If you're watching this, then my worst fears about Madison have come true. I'm so sorry you had to go through this betrayal, but I'm also proud that you're strong enough to survive it." Tears streamed down my face as Eleanor continued. "I want you to know that none of this is your fault. Madison's jealousy, your parents' blindness, the years of emotional abuse, none of it was because you weren't good enough. It was because they weren't." She leaned forward, looking directly into the camera. "I'm giving you the tools to rebuild not just your own life, but to create something beautiful from the ashes of their betrayal. Use the money to help other artists, to protect other victims, to create the kind of family legacy that actually matters." Eleanor's voice grew stronger. "Don't let their cruelty make you cruel. Don't let their greed make you greedy. Use this power to heal, to create, to build something better than what they destroyed." The video shifted to show Eleanor in her art studio, surrounded by paintings. "I've left you something else, darling. Behind the bookshelf in my old studio, you'll find 47 paintings that I created during my final months. They're yours now, along with all of my art supplies and the studio itself." She smiled, that gentle smile I remembered so well. "Paint again, Hallie. Paint like the fierce, talented, beautiful woman you've become. Paint like the artist I always knew you were. And remember that every brush stroke is an act of defiance against people who tried to diminish your light." The video ended with Eleanor blowing a kiss to the camera. "I love you more than words can express. My darling granddaughter. Now go show the world what you're truly capable of. The war I planned for you isn't just about destroying them. It's about building something better." The screen went dark, and I sat in stunned silence. David quietly pushed a box of tissues across the table. "There's one more thing," he said gently. "Eleanor's studio has been maintained exactly as she left it, waiting for you. The key is in the trust documents." I looked at the key he handed me, this small piece of metal that represented not just a room, but a return to who I was meant to be. "What about my parents?" I asked finally. "What do I do about them?" David consulted his notes. "Eleanor suggested that you meet with them before making any decisions. She arranged for a controlled environment where you can hear their side of the story and decide how much mercy you want to extend." And Madison? Madison's fate is sealed. The evidence against her is overwhelming, and the prosecution is already building their case. Eleanor made sure that Madison would face consequences regardless of your decisions about anyone else. I thought about everything Eleanor had told me in that video, about the paintings waiting for me, about the choice between revenge and healing. "I want to see my parents," I said finally, "but I want to see Eleanor's studio first." David nodded approvingly. Eleanor would be proud of that choice. She always said you had her wisdom along with her artistic talent. As I left David's office with the key to Eleanor's studio in my hand and a secure phone in my pocket, I realized that my grandmother had given me something more valuable than money or revenge. She'd given me the power to choose who I wanted to become. But first, I had some painting to do. After all, Eleanor was right. Every brushstroke was an act of defiance, and I had 15 years of defiance to catch up on. The war Eleanor had planned wasn't just against my family's betrayal. It was a war for my own soul, and she'd made sure I had everything I needed to win it. As I drove toward Eleanor's studio, I could almost hear her voice whispering in my ear, "Now show them what you're truly capable of, my darling. Show them what happens when you try to destroy an artist who refuses to be broken." The drive to Eleanor's studio felt like traveling through time. As I pulled into the driveway of her old house, now mine according to David's revelations, I could see the small converted garage where Eleanor had spent her final months painting. The building looked exactly as I remembered it: weathered cedar siding, large windows facing north for the perfect light, and ivy climbing up one wall like nature was trying to reclaim this sacred space. My hands shook as I inserted the key David had given me. The lock turned easily, as if it had been waiting for me all these years. The door opened with a soft creak, and suddenly I was 16 again, spending afternoons with the only person who truly understood me. The studio was pristine, frozen in time like a shrine. Eleanor's easels stood exactly where she'd left them. Canvases still stretched and ready. Tubes of paint were arranged in careful rows on her work table, their labels faded but still readable. The north-facing windows were clean, casting the same gentle light that had illuminated so many of our painting sessions together. But it was the paintings that took my breath away. Behind the bookshelf, exactly where Eleanor had promised in her video message, I found them. 47 paintings, each one more stunning than the last. These weren't the gentle landscapes and still lifes I remembered from my childhood. These were fierce, powerful works that seemed to burn with Eleanor's rage and love. One painting showed a young woman with my face, standing in a storm but refusing to bow to the wind. Another depicted a phoenix rising from ashes that were clearly shaped like the Bennett Solutions logo. A third showed hands, Eleanor's hands, reaching across time to place a paintbrush in younger hands that looked exactly like mine. But the one that made me cry was a portrait of Madison. Eleanor had captured something in my sister's eyes that I'd never seen before, a deep, aching loneliness that made her look almost human. Even in her fury at Madison's betrayal, Eleanor had seen the broken child underneath the monster. I was so absorbed in the paintings that I almost missed the envelope taped to the back of the easel. My name was written on it in Eleanor's careful script, along with the words, "Open only when you're ready to paint again." Inside was another letter, shorter than the others but somehow more powerful. "My darling Hallie," it read, "if you're reading this, then you've seen what I created during my final months. These paintings are my war cry, my love letter to you, and my final middle finger to everyone who tried to diminish us. Paint your response, my dear. Paint your truth. Paint your victory. And when you're finished, Show the world what happens when you try to destroy an artist's spirit. Love eternally, Eleanor. I set the letter down and picked up one of Eleanor's brushes. It felt perfect in my hand, like coming home after a long journey. For the first time in 15 years, I was ready to paint. But before I could put brush to canvas, my secure phone buzzed. David Blackstone's name appeared on the screen. "Hallie," he said when I answered. "We have a situation. Your family wants to meet with you. All three of them. Together." "Where?" I asked, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "My office, in 1 hour. They're desperate. The FBI raids have been thorough, and they're beginning to understand the scope of what's happening to them." I looked around Eleanor's studio, at her paintings, at the brush still in my hand. "I'll be there." "Hallie," David's voice was gentle. "Remember that you hold all the power now. They can't hurt you anymore." An hour later, I walked into David's conference room to find my family huddled together like survivors of a shipwreck. Which, I realized, is exactly what they were. Madison looked nothing like the confident, controlling woman who had locked me out just days ago. Her perfectly styled hair was disheveled, her expensive suit wrinkled, her makeup smeared from crying. She looked up when I entered, and for the first time in my adult life, I saw fear in her eyes. My parents were even worse. Robert sat hunched over, his hands shaking as he stared at the table. Sarah kept dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Her usual composure completely shattered. "Hallie," Madison said, her voice cracking. "Please. We need to talk." I sat down across from them, feeling strangely calm. Eleanor's words from her video message echoed in my mind. Use this power to heal, to create, to build something better than what they destroyed. "I'm listening," I said. Madison leaned forward desperately. "We didn't know about the trust, about Eleanor's plans, about any of it. We thought we were just managing your inheritance properly." "You thought billing my trust account for cleaning supplies was managing it properly?" I asked quietly. Sarah spoke up, her voice thick with tears. "Hallie, sweetheart, Madison convinced us that you needed structure, that paying for your expenses would teach you responsibility. We never meant to hurt you." I looked at my mother, this woman who had raised me but never really seen me. "You locked me out of my own home. Mom, you called me a parasite." "That was Madison," Robert said suddenly, his voice stronger than I'd heard it in years. "That word, that cruelty, that was all Madison. We were wrong to let her control the situation, but we never wanted to destroy you." Madison's face went white. "Dad, that's not fair." "We all agreed." "No," Robert interrupted, looking at Madison with something like horror. "We didn't all agree to steal from Hallie's trust fund. We didn't all agree to change the locks. We didn't all agree to treat our daughter like an enemy." I watched this family dynamic that I'd never seen before, my father finally standing up to Madison. My mother caught between them, Madison's facade of control crumbling completely. "Eleanor was right about you," I said to Madison, my voice steady. "She saw what you really were 15 years ago." Madison's composure finally broke completely. "Eleanor poisoned you against me," she screamed. "She filled your head with dreams that were never going to come true. She made you think you were special when you were just what?" I asked calmly. "Just ordinary," Madison shouted. "Just a mediocre artist with delusions of grandeur. I was trying to save you from a life of disappointment." The room went dead silent. Even Madison seemed shocked by what she'd just said. "There it is," I said softly. "The truth. You weren't trying to protect me or teach me responsibility. You were trying to crush me because you couldn't stand that Eleanor saw something in me that she didn't see in you. David cleared his throat. Perhaps we should discuss the legal situation. Yes, I said, not taking my eyes off Madison. Let's talk about your legal situation. David spread out documents on the table. Madison, you're facing federal charges for embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy, and theft. The evidence against you is overwhelming. Your parents are facing lesser charges, primarily related to their roles in managing the trust improperly. Madison's face drained of all color. What does that mean? It means, David said coldly, that you're looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison. Your parents might face 2 to 5 years, depending on Hallie's decisions. I watched my family absorb this information. Madison began to hyperventilate. Sarah started crying harder. Robert just sat there, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. However, David continued, Hallie has the power to influence these outcomes. Eleanor structured the trust to give her complete discretion over how justice is served. All three of them looked at me with desperate hope. What do you want, Hallie? Sarah asked. Please, tell us what you want. I thought about Eleanor's paintings, about her message to use this power wisely. I thought about the 15 years of belittlement and control, about being called a parasite in my own home. But I also thought about the broken child I'd seen in Eleanor's portrait of Madison, about the parents who had failed me but might not be evil. I want Madison to face the full consequences of her actions, I said finally. No deals, no reduced charges, no mercy. She orchestrated this entire situation, and she needs to pay for it. Madison's face crumpled. Hallie, please, I'm your sister. No, I said firmly. A sister doesn't steal from family. A sister doesn't manipulate parents against their other child. A sister doesn't plan to frame her own parents for crimes. You're not my sister, Madison. You're just someone who happened to be born into the same family. I turned to my parents. As for you two, you enabled her. You chose her manipulation over your own daughter's well-being. You let her control your decisions and your household. You participated in financial theft. They both looked stricken. But, I continued, Eleanor believed you were victims too, in your own way. So here's what's going to happen. You'll plead guilty to mismanaging the trust. You'll serve whatever sentence the court decides, probably probation and community service if you cooperate fully. You'll attend family therapy to understand how you failed as parents, and you'll never ever contact me again unless I initiate it. Hallie, Sarah whispered, you're cutting us out of your life? I'm giving myself the space to heal, I corrected. Maybe someday, if you do the work to understand what you did wrong, we can have some kind of relationship. But it will be on my terms, not yours. Robert nodded slowly. That's fair. More than fair. Madison was crying now, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. This isn't how it was supposed to happen, she gasped. I was supposed to be successful. I was supposed to matter. You could have mattered, I said quietly. You could have been a real sister, a real daughter, a real person. Instead, you chose to be a predator. David began explaining the legal procedures, the timeline for arraignments and trials, the asset recovery process. I listened with half my attention, but my mind was already somewhere else. I was thinking about Eleanor's studio, about the paintings waiting for me, about the brush that felt so right in my hand. I was thinking about the $15 million that would let me help other artists, other victims, other people whose families had tried to crush their dreams. When the meeting ended, My parents shuffled out like broken people. Madison had to be helped to her feet, her lawyer supporting her as she stumbled toward the door. "Hallie," she said, turning back to me one last time. "I'm sorry." I looked at her, this person who had controlled my life for so long, and felt nothing but pity. "No, you're not," I said. "You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference." After they left, David and I sat in silence for a moment. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Free," I said, and realized it was true. For the first time in my life, I feel completely free. Eleanor would be proud. "Yes," I said, standing up. "She would be, and now I have work to do." I drove back to Eleanor's studio as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that Eleanor would have loved. Inside the studio, I prepared a large canvas and arranged Eleanor's paints. Then I began to paint. I painted my childhood, but not as a victim's story. I painted it as a survivor's journey. I painted Madison not as a monster, but as a cautionary tale about what happens when jealousy consumes a soul. I painted my parents as people who lost their way, but might still find it again. But mostly, I painted Eleanor. I painted her hands teaching mine to hold a brush. I painted her eyes, fierce and loving and eternally protective. I painted her legacy, not just the money and the legal victory, but the unbreakable truth that art matters, that beauty matters, that refusing to let others diminish your light is the most important battle you'll ever fight. As I painted, I felt Eleanor's presence in the studio, not ghostly or supernatural, but real in the way that love is real, in the way that lessons learned from people who truly see you become part of your DNA. When I finally stepped back from the canvas hours later, I had created something beautiful, something true, something that would have made Eleanor proud. I picked up my phone and called David. "I want to establish the Eleanor Bennett Foundation," I said, "for artists whose families don't support them, for kids who need someone to believe in their dreams, for people who refuse to let others clip their wings." "That's a beautiful idea," David said. "Eleanor would love that." "Yes," I said, looking around the studio that was now truly mine. "She would." 6 months later, I stood in a gallery in downtown Portland, surrounded by my paintings and by people who understood that art isn't just decoration, it's revolution. The Eleanor Bennett Foundation had already helped dozens of young artists, and the scholarship fund was growing every day. Madison was in federal prison, exactly where she belonged. My parents were in therapy, slowly beginning to understand the damage they'd done, and I was painting again, creating things that mattered, living the life Eleanor had always known I could live. As I watched people respond to my art, as I saw them understanding the story I was telling about survival and transformation and the power of refusing to be broken, I heard Eleanor's voice one last time. "Now show them what you're truly capable of, my darling." And I smiled, because I finally had. The war was over, the artist had won, and Eleanor's legacy would live on in every brushstroke, every painting, every dream that refused to die. This is what happens when you try to destroy someone who was born to create. This is what happens when love is stronger than control, when art is stronger than cruelty, when one person's belief in you becomes the foundation for everything you build afterward. This is what victory looks like, and it's beautiful.